lot of clamps. And you know, you can never have too many, but at some point I'm getting close to having enough. So there was 2 slides on that. Go ahead and click through the next one. There's more around. All right, clamping. What is clamping, and how do you create clamping forces? The most common is via the use of a wedge. You use a basic wedge. A screw is actually a wedge. It's just wound around. Eccentrics are radial wedges. There's levers. You can put a lever force. Spring and elastics is another force. Gravity. Vacuum bags are actually creating force by gravity. Air pressure. If anybody's ever done that, I would have thought it would have been me, and I've never done it. I've got a photo of some guys that did it. Electromagnetic. And there's others. Compression. There's one photo I've got of a compression. All right, next slide. What is clamping? It's temporary holding something. Clamps are not meant to be permanent. It's either holding a single part, either to a fixed object or to provide a method to hold on to something. And then it's also holding multiple parts together, most commonly for gluing, but not always. So this is an exhausting presentation. I'll be tired by the time it's over for sure. But that doesn't mean that I got it all. There's things that, you know, many things, thankfully, several people sent me some additional slides and I missed ideas of different clamps. So let's get into clamps. This is a quick history presentation. Parallel clamp, one of the most common good clamps that we use in woodworking. We call it parallel because these 2 faces are close to parallel and are held closer to parallel than most of the other clamp types that you're going to look at. But the secret about parallel clamps is, guess what? They're not parallel in the clamp. Because as soon as you start applying force between these 2 clamps, this bar is going to bend and it's going to create 2 parallel surfaces. And these are more parallel than any of the other clamps that you see. So the different types, utilities, I broke them down trying to categorize some of them. All right, there's parallel jaw pipe clamps, bar clamps, and all-purpose panel clamps. Next slide. All right. In these true parallel jaw clamps, there's many brands. Very high pressure, 1,700 pounds between these 2 clamps. I was actually going to try to measure it, but that failed. I bought the load cell, but I couldn't get the measurement out of it. I consider these to be the most common preferred method for edge-to-edge clamping because the faces do stay parallel. Bar deflection will occur, as I mentioned. You got to plan for it. When clamping thin panels, do not lay the planks on these bars because these bars are going to bend. If you've got your material laying on these bars, when you clamp it up and they bend, then your plank is no longer going to be flat. And you can find lots of reviews on the different brands. Bessie, our sponsor, you notice all these are Bessie hanging here in Woodcraft. Woodcraft has a good supply of Bessie clamps back there. I've got a few photos here of different uses of parallel clamps. If you can go through them. Next slide. There's a panel being glued up. Next slide. Gluing up a door panel, frames, different ways, and then somebody's, that's not mine, I got more than that, group of parallel bar clamps. All right, next slide. And more pictures. This was a kind of interesting one with this pivoting handle. I know as I age, the strength of my hand's not getting, I'm getting weaker. I wish my clamps had that pivoting handle so I could really put some more pressure on the clamp. When you get into large panels, it's often you see many people alternating the clamps from side to side. Normally not necessarily for parallel clamps. It is common on when using pipe clamps. Next slide. Homemade parallel clamps. There's lots of information on the net about making your own on. So next slide, pipe clamps. All right, the next really common, it's lower cost, pipe clamps. Pipe clamps are not as accurate, so your jaws are not going to stay nearly as parallel as these, which are much more expensive. These are strong. They can provide a lot of pressure. This is a 3/4 inch pipe. Normally you buy the ends and you go to the hardware store and buy your own pipe. It does a fairly good job, but once again, your jaws are not going to stay as parallel. So a lot of people start with these, and then when you spend more and more money, that's when you get into the other clamps. All right, next slide. All right. I've already gone through most of that. Let's just keep going. Gotta watch that clock. All right, here's pipe clamps. You see the alternating clamps from one side to the other. It's very common to do that when you're clamping panels and pipe clamps. Also, another thing that's common with pipe clamps, you see people making these little fixtures to hold your clamps level and evenly spaced. That's something that's very common I've seen. Next slide. All right, bar clamps. I did not own a bar clamp, see, so I've got clamps yet to buy. So this is a bar clamp. It's similar to the parallel clamp, which has a bar, steel I-beam bar. It's similar in construction and method to use to the pipe clamp, but this I-beam bar is stronger than the pipe normally. And it's another version of a parallel jaw clamp. It's very strong and once again can provide a lot of strength. You've got steel I-beams and aluminum formed bars. Next slide. So here's the little aluminum. The great thing about this little clamp is it's light. It's aluminum, it's weaker. And normally the construction of it's not as strong, but if you're just gluing up some small panels and you need something light, this is, you know, a pound maybe. So that's really nice to have some lightweight clamps if you need that. You've even seen here a clamp made where the I-beam is a piece of pine. I'll stop here and say, I'm throwing a lot out there at you. We're going to get into a demo on some of the most common stuff, but just be thinking about clamps. You can buy stuff, you can make stuff, you can adapt stuff for what you need. You're just trying to hold two pieces together temporarily. All right, let's go on. So since those bar clamps, pipe clamps, are really good for making panels like I'm going to demonstrate here, here is a common type of panel clamp. I bought it and I've got 3 of them. You put your panels in here and when you tighten it up, it puts pressure on 4 sides of the panel. So any misalignment between your planks, it's leveled. This is Woodcrafts. I got them right back there for sale. They work great. If you're making up 1 panel a day or a week, this is probably a great little thing to have. Didn't work out for me because I was trying to do, 10 panels a day when I was making cutting boards. So it's a really efficient way of gluing up panels, getting the proper pressure between the edges of the boards, and then keeping them flat. Next slide. You can purchase more elaborate panel clamps. Rockler, Woodpecker, and I don't know what the brand is on the other one there. All doing the same thing, putting pressure on all 4 sides of the plank when you glue it up. Okay, Tom, next. Here's a DIY version of a 4-bar or 6-bar linkage creating a panel clamp. And the one over here on the right is a DIY made out of wood. And notice they're using the wedge between the edge of the plank and the nut to create the pressure in that direction. Wedges are the greatest thing in the world for clamping. Next, here's another version of a DIY, and there's commercial. This is just one, cabinet shops that are making panels. They have things that look like this. There's automated ones, but they make big things, doing all the same thing. Of course, these are not even putting pressure on four sides. Normally, they put enough wood into it, and they plane it down flat, so they don't care if it's just perfectly flat or not when they're gluing them up. Next. Okay, face to face. I kind of separated them, and this was my own categorization of how you separate different clamps. So those were for edge to edge in my mind. They're more rigid, they're stronger. So now we're getting into all the others where you're trying to clamp instead of multiple edges together. Normally you're doing things like faces. You can mix and match. I just separated them somehow. So let's get into the F-style clamps, quick clamps, and some specials. So next slide. F-style clamps. All right, man, what a variety. Here is an F-style bar clamp. This is extremely common type. My fingers aren't working really well. Where sometimes this grasp method is just torsion by, on this clamp here, it's just friction created when this is put into a bind, and some have the little clutch. Here's the lightweight, long version. That's Harbor Freight, and it's not too bad for depending on what you're doing. This is a Bessie, where this is a bent, or this might even, it is bent, piece to make the clamp. It's adjustable here. This is pretty neat in that it does have that handle that turns sideways, so you can get some heavy duty weight on this. Flip into the next slide there, Tom. Who knows where this one came from? It's a type of another F-bar clamp, but look, it's got two heads on it here. I've used it several times in odd things. Different sizes, there's all different brands. Here's an Irwin. Yeah, they come in. Jim said, do you want me to bring my big one? I said, no, I got my medium sized one. Jim's got one that's about, twice this in each direction. But you need to reach out into a distance on something. Like I say, Jim says his will go 2 feet, which is great when you're doing some elaborate furniture and you need to reach out to the middle. Bar clamps, besides having screws on the end of them, here's one that's got a lever. It's a radial lever, but it's a lever with a ratchet on it. Here's Rockler's great at making all the little odd stuff. Here's one that's got a lever mechanism here to overcome, but it's a bar clamp with just a different way. What's nice about this one is that the handle's in a different location. Doug was talking about this version, which is a Bessie. This, you tighten, you move it, if I can make it work, by releasing the thumb here. And then, it tightens up by turning this handle here, and it has some gears in this head. So you can actually apply, thanks Robert, you can apply a lot of force with this one clamp, but the handle's down once again here, where sometimes with the handle up here would be in the way of what you're, so I've got a couple of these. I didn't go out and buy a bunch for sure. So I've gone through most of the ones on the table. See, there's one similar. I just grabbed a bunch of photos of the different clamps. Next slide there, Tom. Here's just more pictures of the same things. So F clamps, you can get various length sizes, strength, Harbor Freight on one end, Bessie on the other, and all the other brands in between. You're not relying on those faces, because normally it's not faces. Normally it's just 2 points. Normally it's between 2 points instead of a large face. You're relying on the faces that you're clamping to hold their location because they're flat against one another. And of course, these have been used for any and everything, for chair rails. You're gluing T's. You got a chair rail going into the back of the chair, all kinds of things like that. All right, so the next big category that we get into is quick clamps. Quick clamps. Quick ratchet, one-handed pistol grip. Everybody's got their own name for them. Category name's long and descriptive of the clamps. They're generally quick to apply and one-handed. You can put this on here, and you can kind of hold this with one hand and tighten the clamp with the other hand. This Irwin clamp is the brand that's most common, the blue clamp. Everybody makes them now. They come in various sizes as well. I've got several of these sizes. Got some little bitty DeWalt's. This is probably one of the first clamps I owned. It's probably 40 years old, a Craftsman. And they make all different sizes of quick clamps, slight variations of the clamps, how they work, but they're all meant to be quick and one-handed for the most part. Rockler's even come up with a gimmick. So I bought some of their gimmicks, and I found one so far. You can pull it and it'll tighten up on its own. So you don't even have to slide it into place. Most of the time that's aggravating, but sometimes it's helpful. Just various applications and uses of the clamps. You'll notice there in the middle, top photo, that one has been flipped around, somewhat similar to this. Doug brought me this one. This is a Bessie. I've never seen this one. It's got an adapter here, so you can extend it, the throat on it. So you've got, if there was a flange here you were trying to get around. On most of the new quick clamps, you can turn it around. Yeah, thank you. Turn it around and put it down here. And now it's a spreader. You can push pieces apart. And this one is really, really cool. This fits in a T-track. So you can mount it, reverse it, and put it here. You can slide that in the T-track on a table, and now you got a clamp down to the surface on the table. This was new to me, so now I got the clamps to go by. Some special, let's see, I've got one of these here. This is a quick one-handed ratchet, and I ran across these some time ago. These were pretty neat. I have found several places. So it's a ratcheting lever, but these had some adjustable. You can always find oddities in clamps. Do you really need all of them? Absolutely not. But hey, my real hobby is buying tools. All right, next slide. There's some interesting photos, clamps. Somebody's adapted and extended the depth of that clamp with the wooden pincher in the middle. I used to make a lot of little toys, and I was making these little trucks, 1/30th scale, and gluing all the little panels together. That's where I ended up with so many of the little lightweight quick clamps. Next slide. All right, I just showed some of those varieties of clamps, quick clamps. all types of clamps. You can go on for hours and use them in every way. Next slide. All right, utility clamps. These are my categories. Hopefully it makes some kind of sense. Spring clamps, really simple. C-clamps, hand screw clamps, and handheld vise. All right, so hit the next slide. Spring clamps. They're really cheap. They don't provide a lot of force, but I find myself using them occasionally. Even, here's a Bessie. It's got a long, I grabbed this about a week ago. It fit somewhere that I didn't have anything else to do the job. You can buy bundles of them. That photo on the bottom, you probably buy that bag of spring clamps for $8 online somewhere. Next slide, C-clamps. All right, everybody knows the C-clamp. One of my favorite clamps I picked up in Japan is a 1-inch, it's probably 25 millimeter clamp. It was very heavy duty, but small. You know, these you use around your shop for various things. It's not a lot. You can use them on wood. You end up clamping your vise down to your table, doing things like that. One thing I do find myself using is like that deep F-clamp, a deep C-clamp to reach into the middle where you got some things that you can't reach, you need to get together. So C-clamps are handy. Not the most common things in the woodworking shop, but they're used. Next slide. Okay, the old hand screw clamp. You know, I just picked up 2 here. Photos of the various sizes. Next slide, you start seeing how they're used sometimes. You know, Garrett Hack here, he had an article, I don't even know which magazine this was out of, different ways that he was using the wooden screw hand clamps. You can do some, and next slide, you can do some unique things with these clamps that you can't do with most of the others. You know, look at what they've done with the round stock there. You use one wood clamp to hold the other one, which is holding creating and V holding a round item. They're can be very useful once you get used to how to use them. Handheld vise clamps. It's another quick clamp. So, you know, Craig makes them. This is a Miles Craft, some Irwin vice grips. So, various things I've been using. I've got 2 or 3 of them around the shop. I use them. Okay, next slide. Bench clamps. There's bench dog holes and a hold fast, T-slots and dovetails. I brought my little, next slide. I brought my little tabletop workbench to show you, these are phenomenal little clamps. The age-old, where's my hammer? Over there. Hold fast that you just drive in with a hammer. You hit it on this side, it loosens up. It holds very well. This is your most expensive Veritas. It does the same thing as this. It costs $100 more than that one, but you don't have to hit it with a hammer. Another version of a clamp. These are all just slid down in the hole. If I loosen that, it's in and out. I can move it anywhere on the table and tighten her down. I don't even know where I found this. I think this one came off of Amazon. Surface clamps. But workbenches are great. You've got different vices, a Moxon vise and a tail vise, and of course vices I left out of my presentation. But with bench holes, there's a lot of things you can do with the various clamps like these and similar to these on a workbench. And of course I had to bring my own because the Soberg, all the dog holes are 1 inch and all my clamps and mine are 3/4. So that's a real quick on dog hole big bench clamps. You know, they're just all over. Really the hold fast in the side holes in the legs of workbench is, I don't have it yet, but I will if I ever get to build my workbench. And here's even some homemade. In a lot of my photos, so many of the clamps that you can go spend $100 for a Betsy clamp. You can, for $20, you can build your own that works. Probably not as strong, but a lot of times it works really good. Next slide. And I'll say here, this is really fast to open your eyes. And it's funny, I'm saying this to some of the people that I know in here, to the various types of clamps, because some people they just allowed me to do this because they asked me and I said yes. Bench clamps, you can have dovetail slots where you cut dovetail slots, and this, I don't even know this brand, they're normally this yellow and green, that are made to slide in the dovetails, and you can clamp to the surface instead of a dog hole. And then, next slide, they are also T-slots. Like we just talked about this Betsy clamp that can slide in a T-slot. There's also other brands that are made to go into T-slots. So if you had a table, you put T-slots in it, it's a different way to clamp pieces to the surface of the workbench. Next slide. Periphery clamps. I'm watching that clock. We're eating up time, so need to go even faster. Next slide. Band clamps. Band clamps are made to go around the outside of an object. Picture frames and boxes is a primary place for using band clamps. Anything that you need to go around, it works around square boxes, so it pulls on all 4 corners or 6 or 8 sides, corners of different sides. Next slide. Around a chair, around this must be a 12-sided tube. Next slide. A threaded rod clamp to clamp 4 corners of a box together. Yeah, I'm surprised there's not rust on it. I haven't used it in a long, long time. But they're there. It's another style of clamp that you can find for putting a box together with. Next slide. Now here is something, rubber bands. Back here on the shelf, I actually bought one because they had some rubber band sizes that I didn't have. Rubber bands around boxes, rubber bands around the odd shaped things. And then I thought I came up with something new, and everybody I've shown it to said, yeah, I knew that. I was in therapy doing just about this thing for my neck, and I go, that would be a great elastic band to tie around things like you put in a chair together, or those type things. So it's just like a rubber band, but hey, you can get any size and length and strength you want. Next slide. More rubber bands going around boxes and tape. I'll just point to the upper right hand 4 miter corners of a box. If I put tape on the back side here, put glue in it, you can fold it together, and you do that around the 4 sides of the box. That can normally be enough glue and tension to hold that together for gluing. It'd be great demo, but for time reasons, we'll keep going. Back mentioning masking tape and gluing up corners, and just using tape in general across 2 pieces. We're trying to hold things together temporarily, and depending on what you're doing, tape can in itself be enough. Special clamps. Let's just jump next page. Corner clamps. Okay, that's what I grabbed a second ago. Corner clamps, which you can glue up a T like so. You can put 2 pieces in it with a miter. And it's funny, here's one
One brand's Bessie and one brand's Irwin, and I tell you, they came out of the same casting.
You know, a miter corner. These little quick clips, once again, Rockler gimmick. It works great if you're using 3/4 inch wood from Home Depot. It's only so accurate, but when you're doing something quick, gluing up boxes to store things in your shop, it works well. Next, oh, well, that was an interesting one. The corner clamp, that's another Rockler gimmick. And when I say gimmick, there's nothing wrong with their gimmicks, but they're normally narrow purposed. And normally do really good at that narrow purpose. So don't take me calling it a gimmick bad. It's just normally a narrow purpose for their function. All right, let's go on to the next. Here's there's a photo of the little blue clamp, some different type of corner clamps. Next slide. Okay, edge clamps. Let's see, how many of these? I've got the little Rockler Bandy clamp, which is a spring clamp with a little elastic here. Lower left-hand corner is a Bessie clamp, edge clamp. I don't know who makes the one at the top. That might have been homemade. This one down here is homemade. So edge clamps is a thing. Normally when you're using plywood, I say normally, in my mind, when you're using plywood and you're gluing on a little piece of solid wood on the edge, is when these would come in handy. Okay, so beyond that, next clamp is some other face clamps. I personally ran into a lot of these. Here's one off the shelf back here, a Woodcraft and edge clamp. It's for gluing up, normally I guess, the edge frames, the edge strips on framing of cabinets, which I not built cabinets, so I've never had to use. Next, different versions of different type of clamps for putting framing together. Next, pinch dogs. Never used them, ran across them a lot. You can see how the outer edges are straight, the inner edges are tapered, so when you nail it into the edge of two boards, it's going to pull those two boards together. Next, spring miter clamps. Jim was mentioning that he's used these before. I've never used them. Woodcraft's got a box of them sitting back there for sale.
That's a great invention. Except they leave dents in your corners.
Yeah, they do. Yep.
Yeah, bed springs work really well for that too.
Bed springs, okay.
They do.
Next. All right, custom clamps. All right, let's get into this real quick. This is kind of, next slide. Clamps. You have odd things. There was an article in Fine Woodworking last month or the month before about custom block clamps to fit what you're trying to clamp together. And I tried to grab a few pictures. The one on the left is kind of most common. This one is also, it's almost a veneer form instead of a clamp, but that's where my photo ended up. Next. You know, a radius corner. I guess gluing a veneer on the edge of a radius corner. He's done a form to make. The one on the left is also more a form than a clamp, but anytime you're trying to glue odd things together, you can always make you a soft piece to match what you're trying to glue to. Next, custom cause. All right, I'll show you the custom cause in a minute. This is a clamp. This is in my video making cutting boards. This clamp, you can see the pivoting Lexan. When I slide that plank in there and I push the handle forward, you can just barely see my hand up there. It clamps that panel down to the sled. And the thing about custom clamps are, and everything that I've shown with your DIY, that even with all the gimmicks that you can buy, there's still some gimmicks you can't buy, and you got to go make your own. So keep your mind open to make what you need. Next, vacuum blocks. John Jones has had this as a presentation in the guild, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years ago. It's really interesting. He makes his own. Rockler sells I think they copied John's concept. I don't know. But he uses a vacuum and these little blocks. You can lay them on your workbench, put your work piece on top of it, turn the vacuum on, and it holds it stationary. Once again, what is clamping? Holding something temporarily. It's really good. We've got videos. We don't have time to show them, but I'm sure we can probably make those available from the website, hopefully.
Don't try to use a forest wood.
Of course, yeah. Next. All right, let's keep going. We'll go on one at a time. Wedges. Now, like I said, the vast majority of clamping is done via some form of a wedge, but the basic wedge is a great clamping thing. You can see how you hold vertical boards, how you can create a clamp on a surface. You slide the wedge in and it's clamped that piece of plywood standing up. It's really neat. John sent me this one. He uses a wedge to hold something temporarily. He lifts that table. I don't even know what's on the table. Drill press, John? Yeah. It keeps the drill press from moving, and it's supported on the 4 wheels, but the wedge is enough to lock it into place temporarily. Next. Nail screws and weights. You're gluing these together. What's really going to hold it together, I mean, you may put tape on here, but you grab up your pin nailer and you throw your pin nailer in there. The pins are just to hold it together while the glue sets. The glue is what's going to hold the joint together long term. But pins, same thing with the screws. Sometimes I was stretching here, but yeah, you can do screws. And weights. Luckily, my little workout area is close to my workshop, so I can go grab these dumbbells because I do that quite frequently. I end up dropping a dumbbell on top of something to hold it in place while the glue dries. Next, double-sided tape. Double-sided tape's not for holding things together to glue, but it's holding pieces together temporarily while you work them. You can put a template onto a piece of wood and run it through your router table. Tape 2 pieces together while you're sanding them or cutting them to make them the same size and shape. Next, forms. Forms is for lamination. Built a rocking chair last summer at Mark Adams. We had forms made to make the curve of the rockers. We glued in like, I think it was 8 layers of 1/8" thick material, glued them together. We waxed, and that's one thing that, I'll get to that in a minute, I think, but notice all the tape, packing tape that's been put around this form so that the glue don't stick to it. Next, more forms and clamps. Next, vacuum bags. Vacuum bags are another clamping. It's normally for veneering, thin pieces to thick pieces. Around forms, in flat places, vacuum removes the atmospheric pressure, so the weight of the atmosphere against the outside of that bag. So that's another form of clamping temporarily. Next. This is the one I said, somebody mentioned it, so I went and found some photos. You can hold things in place with a pneumatic cylinder. I would have thought if anybody ever done it, it would have been me, since I've got valves and air compressors and cylinders in my basement, but I've never rigged it up, never found the need of anything that I repeated.
Those are amazing when you have repetitive things to do and they're all the same size. Boy, that speeds up work like you have no idea.
Yeah, you can see it for sure. Okay, next. Clamping accessories. Next, cawls. Cawls is a big thing. When you're gluing up the panels, we went through the whole thing about the parallel bar, jaw clamps, or pipe clamps, or I-beam clamps for doing the squeeze. When you don't use the custom 4-sided panel, you make calls to squeeze the panels together. And in interest of time, I'm actually not going to open up the glue bottle. Just don't have enough time to go through it. But here is a common setup when I'm gluing up a lot of panels to make cutting boards. I made a custom call. Here's some struts. What's it called? Unistruts. Some linkages here. Got my nice little catch to hold it up in the air for me. So I prep these pieces here. I put glue on all the edges, right? And oh, anybody's making stuff, this is my favorite material. I keep about 10. I buy them 10 rolls at a time. I would lay a roll of wax paper down to cover to keep the glue off of my Bessie parallel jaw clamps. I put my planks in here. They've all been glued on the edge. And that's the thing I'm not doing to save time. I get them aligned, and I can drop these. Now, these are my fancy ones for I had a need to do it quicker. Not quick enough to go buy the industrial clamps. And I can grab this, and it's gonna, if any of these boards are warped, it's gonna flatten up this surface, top and bottom. And then I put my Bessie clamps this way. And without glue, I can still kind of demonstrate what I'm doing. All right, now see what I've done though. I made a little mistake, which is common if you're gluing up a panel and they're almost square, but they're not square. And one direction is thicker than the other. This one, now it's the right orientation. And when you're doing that and there's glue on it, that's really aggravating. That's all. That's also why when you're prepping your wood, you'll mark the sides of it with chalk so you know that you got the right side you're putting glue on. But with my quick clamps, the heavier version, I think these are supposedly putting 300 pounds of force. I don't know what force you have to put into the handle to get 300 pounds of the other, but that's what's on the little label when you buy them. But what I really liked about this system for me, once again, this is, I don't expect any of you to ever go do this. But if you were wanting to make a lot of cutting boards and you had some parallel jaw clamps, this system works out way better than those ones that you buy, because guess what? Now that I've got these clamped together in these Bessie clamps, I can release these. I mean, you have that one clamped, but for illustration purposes. And then I can grab this and I carry it and I put it on the floor. And now that big rack of clamps, I grab some more parallels, put it right back down, and going into the next set. I made something to fit my need.
Does it matter if you set the Bessie clamps first or the calls first?
Kind of do them in unison. Yeah, because if you set the Bessie clamps too tight, the calls won't flatten it out. So normally I pull it kind of tight as I can with the, oh, and here's my other. Sometimes you see it's not level. Get down, you know, you have to tweak it a little bit, but it works out. This system worked very good for me because you add, 10 minutes to putting glue on the edges of that, and that just got done, and I'm ready to go to the next one. Those calls like up here in the photograph would be the more common way. Not many people need to do this, but you put you some wooden calls. Notice the tape on the face of that call to keep it from the glue from setting to it. It'll wipe off of the standard packing tape. All right, next slide I think is another set of panel clamps. Our calls, here on the left, Woodpecker actually sells you some. Now what's unique about those calls is that that surface going against the wood is not straight. It's got a real slight bow to it, so when you pull either end, the call will actually bend to make sure it's made in contact across the full surface. There's another gimmick. Looks like it may work, a little additional thing in the center of a clamp to tighten up. Top right, yeah. See, that right there is before the cawls are tightened, the top center. Different pictures. Cawls are very important when you're gluing up panels.
Do those actually work?
Which one?
This one right here in the upper right.
I've never done it, but I would suspect that they would.
Woodpeckers just started selling it.
Those?
Yeah, those.
Wow. I think I could build them pretty quick. They're good?
It bridges the glue joints, so you don't have to worry about anything sticking.
Yeah, but those are made out of wood. Look like they'd work just as good. Yeah, everything, almost everything that you can buy. I mean, the biggest thing is these clamps have, some steel in them that's stronger than the wood. All right, next wax paper. I love it. I mentioned that. This is my silicone mat that I have at home, along with a couple of blue ones. And here's ones that Woodcraft has here on their workbench. So the glue, it does stick, but anytime the glue gets thick, you can just shake the mat and the glue comes off. So silicone mats. Next, there's other things around your pipe clamps. You can put some PVC on your Bessie clamps. I bought these. I don't know that I've ever used them, but you can put that on your clamp to hold your material up, keep the glue from getting on your clamp. Problem is, it's the same thing that I said earlier. If you lay your wood on there and your bar bends, then your plank's going to be bent. You still need to hold your plank up above that when you're clamping. You can get silicone pads to go on the end of your pipe clamps. Just different things. I didn't mention, of course, I had my little cheap gloves here I use sometimes. I always wear an apron when I'm gluing because I can't keep the glue off of me. Like when I'm picking that thing up, you saw me, I'll pull it up next to my body. I'd always have glue. I don't know how many shirts I've ruined. Next, corner fixtures for gluing, very common when you're making boxes. We talked about exactly how do you clamp and make sure it's lined. I'm not exactly sure, but these are really common by multiple different styles of them. Next, corner clamps. They even have one that pivots. You can make your own, just different styles. Inside, outside clamping with corners. Next, storage racks. I showed you at the beginning I had my own storage racks. Then just, if you get mini clamps, you need to store them somehow. You don't want them laying around on a horizontal surface. Next, carts, mobile carts. It's important. Spring clamps, clamping them on that's how I've got mine up above a window. I stick my spring clamps up. You're always gonna need some type of storage for clamping. Next, glue applicators, Milton's gonna hit some of that. Next, some other interesting pictures that I found. A screw press for veneering, lower left. These little clamps here to go through. That's kind of like a homemade moccasin vise. An extension here out of a vise to clamp a saw blade. Next. These go into, what do you call those holes in this? Pocket screws, thank you. A different type of framing clamp. Now here's, I don't even know what term, I've been using these on machines. I design packaging machines for a living. You know, we've been using these, I've just always called them Distato clamps. That's the deep sea clamp with a support. Now here's the other one, pole clamp. Somebody mentioned that to me. It might have been Steve, I'm not sure. I've seen these, I've never used these. I think they're normally used for guitars. To put pressure, you got a box above, and so you bend that material and stick it in there, and it puts pressure down on the surface of that guitar. Next, spool clamps. Another one that comes up, it's a piece of all thread with some threaded rod. And I'm done. And I've got this custom clamp that's been in my cutting board video that's on YouTube if y'all want to see that.
But not intimately. You need to pick your go-to finish, not coat, your go-to finish for a finish for you to stay with. A lot of that's true about adhesives. Tonight, we're gonna go through this board fairly quickly. I have a handout that'll detail all of that, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. But I'm hoping that you'll look at what you do in terms of gluing and say, I think that one and that one will help. This one I've never heard of, never used, but I'm gonna try. If we do that, I think I'm confident that. So too much glue is a problem, not enough glue is a problem. If you err on one side or the other, you're gonna be better off putting too much glue on and wiping it off and cleaning it up and wasting glue than starving your joint where you don't have enough glue. Obviously, the best way to do it is put just the right amount on. So the question is, how much glue is just the right amount? I'm going to pull on one of Jim's analogies. How do you type the tension on a bandsaw blade? I can't tell you, but I can show you. So if I had time tonight, I would actually do a glue joint and show you. But you will learn, you'll learn the amount of squeeze out you get. The squeeze out will tell you. No squeeze out, probably don't have enough glue. If it's running down the board and I've got it all over my workbench, probably too much. So look at that carefully. How do you apply the adhesive? You've got several choices. The one I like the best is my finger because I always can find it. I never lose it. So whenever I'm putting it on, I use it. My finger is straight. I'm the apron guy too. If you're not got glue on with my hand. Foam brushes are good. You buy foam brushes for adhesives or finish, be sure you buy one that you don't buy at a box store. These are made in the USA and you don't, after about 2 minutes, end up with the handle in one hand and the foam in the other hand. They actually have a reservoir in them, the bigger ones, so you can dip them in and that reservoir fills itself up. Just like with finishing, you put it on the material. If you start up like this, then as you go around, if you just press that a little harder, you will clear out that reservoir. You don't have to keep going back to your glue brush. Another one for small is to take the old plumber's tool, which is, I think it's called an acid swab, and that's what you put flux in plumbing. That's really good to putting glue on a narrow edge. The problem you have with these, again, if you buy them at a box store, you spend half your time picking out the bristles because they get in your glue and they get in your finish. The way you fix that problem is you take some CA glue, real thin, and when you get a new brush, put a real thin layer of CA glue right across the top of the ferrule on both sides. Hit it with the accelerator, those bristles will not come out. Now, if you put too much in, you're going to have a solid bristle. It's very good, but we'll have bristles. So you got to kind of, that can sometimes help you do the job. Use the thin. Also keep some very inexpensive bristle brushes. The cheaper they are, the better. Because all you're doing is spit the glue on the surface. You're not trying to get a perfect glue joint, a perfect finish. So the cheaper the better. We sell these at the checkout stand. You always buy two, one for gluing and one for basting your barbecue. Roller is an extremely effective way of doing it. They have a serrated edge, so if you're gluing cutting boards like Kevin demonstrated, you put the glue down the middle of the board, run this back and forth, and you'll get a pattern where you'll see the glue, and if you get a consistent pattern, you know you got it fine. After a while, you'll learn what too much is and what not enough is. If you're doing big boards, you want to use something like this for your glue, and this goes on, and this does the same thing. And then when it dries, it feels right. So if you were doing silicone. Yep. So this comes right out of there, and this comes right off of here. And it pops, the glue pops right off. You know, if you're not doing a lot of gluing, you'll probably find this big enough. It would be rolling. Just like you're doing on the wall. When you have a big 6-inch paintball, you put your glue here, put it in here, you load it up, load up your roller, run it down the board. Glue rollers, the other thing are the plastic bottles like these. They come in 3 different sizes. This is a bigger one, middle size, and there's a small one. The small one's really handy for doing like dovetail joints and really small places. You'll soon learn to write the number of the tight bonds so you can tell them apart. Can you tell from where you're setting which one's tight bond 2 and which one's tight bond 3? It's always darker than lighter. When you leave today, if you want to see what tight bond 1, 2, and 3 look like after they dry on a piece of poplar, it's right here. We would sell more of this than any glue we have if we didn't ask the customer when they check out. Why do you know why you bought the red? I like red. Wrong reason. And they're sort of together, and there's usually a lot of red, and so most people don't realize that this has a very limited working time and a very short planting time. There is a time where this is a very valuable resource to the glue thing. One is you're doing jigs and fixtures. You don't need to set overnight. I use this when I taught public school woodworking because I had a set of clamps for a class. It had to be used 6 hours all day long. So I had to be able to clamp something up, the second hour could take out the clamps and use for the next one. So there is a time when if that's all you need, that's all you need. There is a new version of this now that Kevin was mentioning that is designed for to be used on wood that has been pre-treated. It has something in it so that it's not perfectly clean and the glue may not soak it in. Let's put the chart up now. Okay, why don't you copy that down? Why don't I just give you a copy of it? Would that be easier? Should be plenty for everybody. And when this is over, I'll give you a copy of my notes so you won't have to try to write all that down.
At the very end, would you put, at the very end, would you put that volunteer sign back up? What is that thing? So remind everybody. Okay.
So Tyson 1 has a 5-minute working time that has around 30-minute, 24-hour time. And they all have at the end 24 hours because they want to be sure that it's really going to be set. There's 2 things that affect adhesive in its drying time and its working time. Temperature and humidity, just like corn epoxy, just like the higher the temperature, the faster it dries. The higher the humidity, the slower it dries. Another critical thing about all the adhesive here is that your work needs to be, the glue needs to be at least 50 degrees before you start. It also needs to stay at least that temperature during the entire drying time. So I use one of these guns that you just push on things and it tells you how much the temperature is. Those are very helpful. If you're this time of year, if you're gluing up in your shop, it's in the garage, and it's 55 degrees when you do it, you say, I'm fine. And it takes it to dry 10 hours, it's probably not gonna be 55 degrees at 10 o'clock at night. So what happens in the last few hours of that gluing process, the chemistry starts breaking down, and you don't get the adhesive and the quality that you expected for your glue. So if that's an issue, you either take it inside and let it dry, or it's warmer, or you wait till a warmer day. Number 2 and number 3, very much alike, and most of the time often used. Number 3 is the one that's totally waterproof. It's the one that if I ride in your boat, you have to make it like a 3 and not 2. This is water resistant, this is waterproof. Interesting thing last year when Alex Snodgrass was here doing end-grain cutting boards. Because I've always made all of my end-grain cutting boards out of Type-On 3. I don't know what you use. He said, no, that's wrong. You use Type-On 2. So why? He said, because Type-On 3 dries very, very brittle, very strong. Type-On 2 does also, but it has a little bit more pliability to it. So if you do end-grain cutting boards where you glue them 2 directions, and they're gonna get a lot of wear over many years on a countertop, being washed off and so on, the preference is 2 will give you more flexibility than 3. Now, the way he came up with that was he sold cutting boards where he lives in Virginia at a craft shop, big tourist area, and he had them in the window. And he made them up and he had them, they were like $200 or $300 a piece. And he noticed that the boards that sat in the window where the sun hit them all day, in Type-On 3, would not break, would begin to separate and have a bug. The ones that had Type-On 2 did not. So I'm gonna leave that decision up to you, whether you go with 2 or 3. I still make a lot of end-grain cutting boards, and I still use Type-On 3. Old habits are hard to break.
On the Type-On, if it changes color, does that mean it's bad? Can I reuse it? I've noticed in some, like Type-On 2, changes color. I don't know if it's, I'm not too cold in the garage.
Could be. And also, when you take your glue, and you haven't used it for a while, be sure that it settles some before you get the good old shaker of it. You know, if it's really cold, but you know it's good, then don't put it in the microwave, please, but put it in the oil. A can of water that's hot, that'll warm it up. If it's a warm day, put it down. So, yeah.
Real quick, years ago, when we were going down the Galleria, I talked to George on Driscoll. He said that he came from Wisconsin. And he had glue, came down with it. He said it was really because it got too cold.
When it's too cold, the chemistry changes. Now, I'm going to give you a piece of literature at the end. It's put out by Type-On. And this thing has stuff that's amazing. It says that your glue can freeze up to 3 times and let it go back to the normal temperature. Mix maybe 5% water, you get it mixed up a bit and it's fine. So when you're in the bathroom and have a lot of extra reading time, because that's about how exciting this is. There's a lot of good stuff about Type-On, all the adhesive and stuff you wouldn't expect about freezing and how long are they going to be good for. Most of these are going to be good for 2 years. Now, that is depending upon where you bought it and how fresh the glue is when you bought it. So think about that. Woodcraft gets an order every Tuesday. Our warehouses in West Virginia, everything that comes in the store except lumber has to be bought from there. They work very hard to make sure the warehouse doesn't have a lot of glue that's getting old. Remember several months ago, I think it was Lowe's was selling these for, the bigger one than this, for 99 cents. And they had racks of it, they had cases of it. And if you look real close down at the corner in the little letters, it said, this glue may have expired. It may not have expired, it was expired. And they found it in the warehouse, and they said, wow, that's a lot of inventory to throw away. So, you have to tell intelligence, and well, let's just make it 99 cents and they'll buy it, and they did. But you know what you bought. So you want to be sure that the inventory that you, when you buy it from, they bought it fresh and they don't keep it in their shop for weeks and weeks and weeks. Because it can get over. That's one of the advantages of buying where they turn in. All right.
I can't move it, but I
One
can't two.
one other thing on the Python, if you read somewhere on their website, that if it's set too long and it's getting kind of lumpy or a little thick,
Yes.
they say to shock it and you bounce it on the tabletop.
And you know, I used to have to do that to get my lid loose. My lid loose.
And it will
Yeah, you do that. You know, it's kind of like
energize it or
adhesives.
whatever.
When I get
Loosen it
if
up.
this is a can of polyurethane, you don't put it in a shaker. You just kind of do this. Because you don't want to fill it up full of bubbles. And use his adhesive is kind of the same way. You know, you just want to get it going, and when it gets down a little bit, you can actually squeeze it. And if you're using an old ketchup bottle or a mustard bottle that you bought, do a better job to ensure that it's just, if you take it right to your project, the first thing's gonna come out is probably some water. And you're gonna know, well, that's not very good. So give it a shot on the paper or something first, so when you start putting it on your project, you've got the real adhesive that's gonna work right. Advantage of hide glue is that it is, if I have a joint made with hide glue, like let's say I glued a chair together, I wasn't sure I can take water, I'm using a little natural sponge like this. So these can just hold a lot of water, you go right down the glue joint, it'll soak into the glue joint, and you can take the joint apart. Then I can take this to the sink and wash the glue right out, and also wash the glue down your drain so it doesn't stick in your garbage disposal. This is the one your grandfather used. This is the one you buy today. And your great grandfather probably makes high glue like this, mixing the double glue. We sell all of those. Take the course. All right, epoxies. There's a big difference between epoxy glue and epoxy glue. And I have a lot of trouble with customers who don't understand it. When you come up to the counter with this, I'm asking you, what are you gonna do with this? Well, I'm gonna pour it into a big cavity in a drawer, in a flat. No, this is not epoxy pour, this is epoxy adhesive. It's designed to put two pieces together. Advantages of epoxy is they have a lot of strength and they will go into a regular surface. So if I'm fixing a chair and I have a ground that's kind of rough, worn off a little bit, I would want to use the periphery. This is 5 minutes, this is 15 minutes. Means you have 5 or 15 minutes of working time before it starts to set up. My theory is, why buy the 5 when I can have 15? Because I don't know, I may have to go to the bathroom and home right.
What's the shelf life of that, once you open
So all of the adhesives are on the bottom. Yeah, most of them. This is about a year. Epoxy is 2 to 3 years. After you open. So that's another thing. It's like anything like this. And at the very bottom, I have shelf life. And the shelf life's it's very consistent, but the working time is crazy because it says you have 5 to 24 hours. What? It really means after 5 minutes, it's going to start to set up. So the advantage of 3 is it gives you more working time than 2 does. If you look at your chart. The advantage of number 1, it's QSDC, quick and sloppy, dirty copy. It does it quick and you're through. But you don't have much time to do some little things around. I didn't bring any of the polyurethane glue. To me, it's kind of like Gorilla Glue. If you use Gorilla Glue, which is like polyurethane, you put it into a cavity and it kind of bubbles up for a little bit. And it makes the joint proud. And you have to take a little bit out. But it's good for some things. But remember that if you have, trying to do a penny board with polyurethane, you're not gonna be very happy with the result. It's gonna pop all over, it's gonna scrape it off. And you gotta think, when's this stuff gonna settle down so I can.
I heard somebody talk about Gorilla Glue, they now have another one that doesn't foam
They
up.
do have a new. And they have several varieties. In fact, I'm amazed at how the marketing people at Gorilla Glue have made that glue more desirable for a lot of people. Polyurethane, plastic resin, the glue that I, in my career, have used more than anything else. When I taught public schools, we bought it by the gallon. We don't sell it to Woodcraft, we'll never sell it to Woodcraft. Because Robert says we don't need it. It's brown powder. The reason I have this is I got this from John Reuter, because he uses it as I use it for veneering and for any kind of dark wood where I have squeeze out and they don't want a glue joint to show. Walnut, mahogany, all of those, if you use this, you mix up a slurry. How do you know how much? Well, you get it too thin, it's not gonna work. You get it too thick, it's not gonna spread out. So work at it, you get it just right. No, yes.
Is that Resorcinol?
Resorcinol resin.
Where do you get it?
Actually, you can't buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's. You can't buy it at Amazon. You can buy it from people who sell veneer. I did buy a small can from someplace online, but I hadn't. And I don't know why, because that's really a good adhesive. Not a good breed.
Joe's probably got it.
All right, let's move to the next one, and that's our CA glue. CA glues are used and misused. CA glue. We have switched now to Mercury because the other brand we had, even though it was made in Atlanta, we were getting it and it was outdated when we got it. The difference over the CA we used to have is the other one, if you kept it in the refrigerator, you would get 6 months extra use out of it. If you kept it in your deep freeze, it would last for life. Think about that. Yeah. This one you do not refrigerate. And it says on a sign over there, do not refrigerate. So the advantages of a CA glue is the fact that it glues up almost instantly and you can't pull it apart. But you can take the shear strength and pull it and knock it apart. So if I glue 2 pieces of wood like this, the CA glue, and I did it correctly, you could not pull these apart. But I could put it in a vise and just take my hand and pop that and chop right off because there's no shear strength. So when you're fixing something like a chair, and not only are you concerned about being able to glue it together, but you're concerned about shear strength, you want to go to epoxy because that has both. Remember, on any epoxy, whether it's a glue or epoxy that you pour, you always add B to A or 2 to 1. The first one's the resin, the second one's the catalyst. Best thing to do is take a piece of cardboard or something, squeeze out a B in each one, put it together. Don't get too close to it when you're mixing it. Don't get over it like this. If you've heard John Jones talk about how long he lost his sense of smell because of CA glue, you appreciate the fact that that's something you don't want. We just started carrying Starbond. What I like about this over most CA glues is it comes already tinted. This is brown. We have it in 4 different shades. And the other thing is this has within this kit, I'm not going to take it apart, but it's got a bunch of adapters that go on the end, and I mean, it is really, still a really, really small one hole. Their accelerator goes with their glue. Your cell phone doesn't work with my cell phone charger because I want to sell you mine. So it's the same way.
Come in thin, thick.
I'm sorry?
They come in thin, thick.
It does. No, this is all medium. It comes, we don't buy it. All medium. Yeah, we've only carried it about a month and it's on top of the glue rack over there. We do not have the thin in this, but this is pretty thin stuff. It's not as thick. This is not as thick as the thick is in CA. Yes.
What's the best use between thin and medium? I've always wondered what
Well, the
application.
thin is probably what you'd use if you turn on a wood lathe and you're filling up the pin holes or something like that. And you've got the pressure of holding the rag against the pin blades that goes around. If I have a really, really small crack, and I may use the thin, I probably use 10 times more thick than I use thin. If I'm using thin, it's almost a question, do I really need to fill that hole? The other thing is, this stuff doesn't dry out. We have it in these cabinets of plastic. That's right. That's right. If you get something, if you have a slab and you've got a CA glue or an epoxy, and you can tell that the crack goes pretty much all the way through. If you put either one of those glues on and then take the shop vac and put it underneath it, and don't put it too strong, it'll suck it right into your vacuum. But if you put something on that, you can actually force that down. Put your shop vac on low. You can actually move that epoxy down in.
You could use a.
Do that very carefully. I'm sorry?
Take like a t-shirt.
Yep.
Put it over the back.
Right, works too.
That way you filter, yeah.
Yep.
Can you speak to how these different glues adhere to itself? You put on a coat and it dries.
Yes.
I want some more.
Okay.
Which ones work better?
This one works best because they say in 5 seconds you put the second coat on. So if I'm doing a cutting board and I get it finished and I realize I have a hole that's about 1/8 of an inch deep. If I use this heavier CA glue or epoxy, I'm going to put it on there and it's going to lay on the top, and I'm going to have to take a toothpick and kind of poke it down in there, and it's going to level around, and I'm going to have to futz around with it a long time.
2 minutes, Milton.
Okay. When I do this, it goes in and you hit it with the accelerator in 5 seconds, and you go right back after 5 seconds and hit it again. If you got to put 10 coats on, accelerator, squirt, do 10 times. So you can do a lot more with that faster. Okay, 2 more I'm going to talk about briefly, and that is speed set. And sometimes making bandsaw boxes, you need to glue the edges together while you can cut off the rest of it. You got about 5 minutes. This is quick and thick, and it's nice because if you're doing a bookcase where you have slots vertically, the glue doesn't beat you to the bottom. You put it at the top and it just runs down very little. Contact cement, great for veneer, great for putting Formica on. The only thing that doesn't stick to this is a brown bag or the paper he has up on top. So if you're putting a big piece of veneer on something, you put contact cement on both surfaces, you put the brown paper right up here along the top, leave about 1 inch. You can do whatever you want to with the contact, it won't stick to the paper. Get this lined up perfectly, just where you want it. Get that tight, and then carefully pull the brown paper out down the line, and you'll get a very good layout of that. Newspaper won't work. Cheap brown bags don't work. Butcher paper works the best. Yeah, that works too.
The brown paper that covers the floor, the new floors.
That's great.
Okay.
Am I out of time?
You are.
Okay, then
Thank you so much. I know we
okay.
cut you short. You know, 3 times.
Okay.